Hope everyone's having a great day so far. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar on keeping your students and employees connected and engaged during the COVID-19 pandemic. We appreciate you spending just under an hour with us today and taking the time to learn how your peers are rapidly adapting to a more virtual space in these ever-changing circumstances that we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And our featured speaker today is Matt Wilmore, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Modo. Matt is one of our experts on the Crisis Response Star Kit that we're now offering as part of Modo Workplace and Modo Campus. Before we get started, I wanted to point out the admin console on your screen. Everyone on the broadcast will continue to be on listen-only mode, and if you have any questions as we go along, please enter them into the chat box. We'll set aside time at the end of the webinar to respond to as many questions as we can. If you'd like to rewatch a recording or like to share this with any colleagues of yours, you'll receive a recording of this webinar directly to your email after the webinar concludes. I'm going to hand things off to Matt to get our webinar started for today.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for spending some time with us today, whether it's in the afternoon or morning, depending on where you happen to be. I just appreciate you spending some time with us. And most importantly, hope everybody is safe and healthy, staying relatively sane and at home if you happen to be at home. Again, my name is Matt Wilmore. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing here at Modo. And I'm going to take you through some ideas, thoughts, observations, and next steps that you can take with regards to engagement. Now, we actually titled this webinar, Keeping Students and Employees Engaged During COVID-19. We're actually not going to talk about COVID-19 specifically for most of this webinar. We're going to talk about it at the beginning and the end, but this is really, given this new normal, how do we actually handle this and make the best out of it? And so in terms of today's topics, we really have three things we're going to focus on. We're going to start by talking about this new normal of user engagement that we're rapidly entering, or are really in already. We're also going to talk about what your users need and demand in terms of engagement, just to set the stage for what's going on. And then what I want to spend the most time on today is helping to create that user engagement plan. So first, let's talk about entering this new normal of user engagement that all of us are experiencing in one form or another. And it's helpful to define what is that new normal. At its core, it's really this idea of a distributed campus and workplace. Everything that we're supposed to be doing, that we had been aiming to do this semester, this fiscal year, this quarter, is still happening, except that we are not at the office, we're not on campus anymore, but we're expected to do these things. So we have this distributed idea while we're trying to maintain our rhythm and progress. At the same time, the community that has been built up on a campus or workplace, we want to maintain that and even grow that if possible. But again, doing so without being in person. Regardless of how this pandemic ends, we will see, without doubt, an augmented way of life after this is over. Even if we go back, let's say in the summer or the fall, and we're back to our old habits, there are going to be some things that have changed. Moreover, there's a huge opportunity here to make the best out of this that we'll talk about later. At this point, it's really critically important to understand how to maintain and grow that engagement you have with your users in this situation we have. And there are some really unique opportunities. What's not changing, though, are tools like a campus or workplace app that help drive engagement. And these are tools that have been used while people were on campus, but now you have the ability to continue to build that over time remotely and then benefit from that later. So it's important to look at what's at stake here. And there's really a lot. On the goal side, things like sales goals, graduation rates, matriculation rates, all those things are at stake now that people are not on campus. The student retention you have, student loyalty, employee loyalty, people coming back is also at stake, especially for education. This is critically important that you keep your retention rates up, especially freshman to sophomore year. Those are all up in the air now, and things need to be done to help secure those as much as possible. Going into potential employees and potential new admitted students, that enrollment and recruitment process is also at stake. As we have already seen, students are either considering maybe I should not go to school in the fall. And both students and employees are thinking about attending a school or starting work at a job that's maybe closer to home, so that if something like this were to happen again, they wouldn't be so far from the people that can help them. And then for both higher education and enterprise, investments and partnerships that were either in progress or have already been established, those are at stake as well. As people move away, and this expectation that people will be able to get together has now been reduced or eliminated, things that depend on those physical connections or those physical gatherings are at stake. And so it's important to recognize everything that is included. And so how does an app like this, or how does an app platform help with this? Really, each of these things that we talk about here require engagement, and that engagement can be driven through the application. Just because we haven't been doing it to date or not doing it as much as we could be, doesn't mean we can't change and have that affect how this turns out for us. And there's an opportunity here to drive culture, build community, and build this new normal that you want, instead of laying back and letting it happen to you and just dealing with the result. You have the opportunity here to define what that new normal is for you. When you're talking about engagement, those who have been doing this for a long time understand everything that's involved. When you move online, especially for a crowd or a group of people that traditionally had done this in person, there are some new challenges to deal with for sure. How do you deal with those new users continuously at a distance? Things that we took for granted, being in the same room, being on the same campus, in the same building, are now gone. And how do we have that same type of engagement, the same level of engagement, even better engagement perhaps, but at distance? It can also be difficult to assess interaction and sentiment even. This face-to-face interaction that you had in the past, you may not have now. So it may be more difficult to assess that. And motivation can certainly stall out due to distractions. There are things around your office that just are, your office is set up to allow you to work and be productive. And if you're at home, there are distractions that just exist as being part of your home that's not work that now you have to contend with. Some of those are good, some of those are not so good, but they're all there. We need to understand how to deal with them and how your users are dealing with them and how to work around that. And so it's important for us to think, how can a tool like a campus or workplace app make a difference in this? How can it help to address these challenges and actually positively impact the issues that you might be seeing? So with that, I want to shift topics a little bit and pose the question, what do your users need and demand in terms of engagement? And what solutions do you need to drive to help achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve given this new environment? So engagement today must be based on the realities of today. What you had in place, even last month, really doesn't apply anymore because everything has changed or is still changing. There's a common idea that in-person engagement is pretty asynchronous, in that I can talk to somebody, they can talk right back to me, we can have these big meetings together, and we can see that engagement happen in real time. In a distributed environment, however, that engagement is more asynchronous. And you may put something out there for all of your users or specific users, and you may not get something back right away. So your expectation for how you get feedback on an engagement or how you measure the effectiveness of it needs to change based on the fact that this engagement is asynchronous in a distributed environment like we have now. And despite not being on campus or at the office, your users still, of course, expect that engagement. But because the environment is different, that engagement needs to change as well. And so for those of you who have a campus workplace app today, I'd want to pause for a second and just have you think, does the home screen of your app really reflect today's needs? Or do they reflect the needs of, let's say, a month ago where everybody was on campus? Think about what's on that home screen and what a user today might be looking to tap on or select to get some work done, to get an answer to a question, or to find help. Are the things on your home screen and throughout your app reflective of those realities today? One other thing to think about is that the demand for engagement that is happening may not actually come in the form of an overt request saying, hey, I wish you would do this. It may be much more subtle and manifest itself later when users are disconnected or disengaged. Even though users are not here, they're not in the office, they're not on campus, they still require that require that engagement, demand that engagement, and it's up to you to help deliver that. Now, I realize we're putting a big tall order up there. Do not worry, we're going to help you understand how to actually do this, but I just want to help set the stage. So it's safe to say that, as I said earlier, the needs have not really changed, merely the environment, but that does have a lot of implications there. Users, just like they did before, still want a sense of normalcy. Things like normalcy, structure, routine, progress, goals, those are all still top of mind for your users. And it's crucially important to maintain that motivation, that progress and engagement in order for the users and the organization to continue towards its goals. Individual and group recognition, as I mentioned here, are more important than ever, especially as people may feel more disconnected from their coworkers, from their peers, and from the organization that they're part of. Reaching out, letting people know that they're important is crucially important, as well as the reinforcement that these students and employees are part of something bigger and greater than themselves. Helping to reinforce that goes a long way. For those of you who are teaching or working on a college campus, a lot of that's easy because as you're walking across the campus, you see all types of reminders and signs that you're part of something bigger. Same for a company, walking into the headquarters or seeing all these sites and reminders and people that help you remember that you're part of something bigger. If you're at home, that may not be there. And so how do we reinforce that idea when people aren't at the office or on campus? And so a campus or workplace app helps you to deliver those engagements and approximate some type of normalcy such that people can continue to have that motivation, that excitement, that engagement, and move forward towards those goals. One thing that's really interesting to think about is that the device where that app is installed is typically on hand 24/7 for the user. This is something that we don't see with email, we don't see with text, we don't see with other forms. The device is always there. So you always have opportunities to continue to engage with those users. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily that we want to send them texts or push notifications every 20 minutes, but we have an opportunity to continually drive that engagement with the device that they're guaranteed to have in their hands, especially in a time of emergency like this. And so one of the other reasons, other ways rather, that this app helps is helping to make resources available to help accelerate that return to normalcy and approximate that normalcy. Messaging, information, engagement, excitement, motivation, all can be delivered through the app. So although your users aren't physically on campus or at the workplace, they can still feel connected and motivated and excited to move forward. And so absent the physical community, this distributed community can emerge and grow. And so there's all types of things to consider in the community itself, how people collaborate, how people study and work if they're not on campus. This lack of face-to-face interaction that people had just grown used to from being in a physical environment, and even distractions and a lack of oversight that might have been present in an on-campus or at the workplace. And so it's important to think about what really worked for you in terms of engagement in the physical community. And then it's important to think about why that worked. What's the root cause for why that means worked? What about that engagement was really successful? Why? And then is there a way to approximate that for a distributed community? And so this opportunity really does exist to create and foster this community and address these barriers. What's really interesting to think about here is not how we just sort of deal with each of these things, but how can you flip them over and turn each of these challenges into a benefit? How can you take the lack of interaction as an example and flip it and turn that into a way that actually drives engagement? How do you proactively push more interaction through things like video chat? or allowing people to share parts of their lives that they wouldn't have if they were all in the office together. How do you take something like collaboration, which you may have had, you thought you had figured out because people were all together? What if you now had a better way to collaborate because people weren't together? And so a platform like an app helps by turning these challenges into benefits. And the really interesting thing that will come out of this, if you're able to do this, and of course you are able to do this, but if you do this, is that anything that you build here for this idea of a distributed workplace comes to benefit you when everybody comes back to campus or comes back to the office. So you're not doing this just for the period where we are being asked to stay at home. You are doing this for the betterment of the entire campus and workplace community. And when you come back to campus, all those things that you've built up to help support your users are still there and still applicable. So this isn't done just for a couple months. This is a permanent improvement that you can make to how your users engage with each other and with the organization. So now let's get to the fun part. Let's talk about how we actually create this engagement plan. So when we're talking about creating this engagement plan, the first thing to remember and to keep in mind is that your app is the new campus and workplace. Absent of somebody coming into the office or coming to campus, the app is where they go. Now, I know a lot of people are putting information about COVID-19 or things like that on the website, but think about your users. Is the website where they're going every day typically? And the answer is probably no. If you think about users who use the app while they're on campus, a lot of times, especially for higher ed, that website is more of a marketing tool than a tool for existing students, staff, faculty, alumni, etc. The app is the campus, the app is the workplace, and this is where your users want to go to not only find information, but to get stuff done. An important idea to think about here is consider your organization, whether it be a university, whether it be a giant company. If they started completely remote from the beginning, what would your engagement strategy be then? As opposed to, we have this big strategy that's based on people being in person, now we're having to adapt it. Think about it from the other side. And if you never had an office or never had a campus, what does your engagement strategy look like? As I said just a minute ago, everything you do as part of this engagement plan will continue to be impactful once people come back to the campus and come back to the office. This isn't something that's being done in a vacuum or just while we're being asked to stay at home. This can have a permanent impact on that community that you're building. And so we want to ask the question, how can you create and grow a distributed community with your app? Not adapt the existing strategy you had, but how can you actually grow a community in your app? And more importantly, what experiences can you provide that bring your users back into the app over and over? This is a challenge we've talked about with customers for years. It's very easy to get somebody to download the app and come in once, maybe twice. How do you get them to come back in for the 10th, the 50th, the 100th time? That is really what's key here, and your engagement plan is absolutely crucial to making sure that people not just download the app and come in once, but come back, because the experience and the engagement is so great, they want to be part of it, even if they're not on campus or at the office. When talking about growing a distributed community, it's really important to encourage and enable collaboration. Now you might say, oh, we have email, we have Slack. What can you do beyond that? How can you encourage and provide tools to enable, and like I say here, enable and encourage and empower people to collaborate and work together even more often than they might have in person? It's important to continue to pull your users, ask them questions. This is not only just for engagement, but provides a number of benefits for you. Nudging behaviors allow you to, through the act of asking a question via a poll, you're subconsciously reminding the user to do something, that they should think about something. Even something like a poll in their app asking, what's your biggest challenge with regards to working from home? Think about a question like that, with answers being things like distractions, feeling disconnected, and work-life balance. So there's many levels to a poll like this. The first is, of course, nudging behaviors. You're forcing people to think, at least for a moment, about this challenge to a point where they may want to address it or make it a little bit better, or at least ask for help about how to make it better. You also, of course, gain feedback just for the question, not just for the question, but how the app could evolve to help better address those questions. So let's say we asked this question and 75% of people said feeling disconnected. You have a target now for what you can do in the app and what you can do for your online community to address that. And it'd be really interesting to get that number, address it in the platform and in the app, and then come back a few weeks later and see if that's still the number one question. So you can use questions like this for nudging as well as gaining feedback for app content. Another nice thing that you can do with these polls is gauge sentiment for big decisions you might be wanting to make. One example I'll give here is that Northeastern University, which is here in Boston, had announced that they were going to cancel their 2020 commencement and immediately received a huge backlash from students, which forced the administration to step back and say, all right, we're going to think about this again and come back with a better idea. Had they had a tool like this to ask their users, what would you think about a 2020 commencement that is either virtual or delayed or canceled, they probably would have gotten a much different answer. And either they would have made a different decision based on the poll data, or at least not been so surprised when they had such a big backlash from the users. And so little innocent polls like this have a huge impact on your ability to understand your audience, drive that behavior through nudging, and then help gauge sentiment ahead of time. I also encourage people, as part of growing this distributed community, to encourage people and to invite others into their new normal. As we talk about that new normal, the fact that it's all distributed, there are things that are a bigger part of our lives than there were before, and things that are much less in our lives than there were before, those interactions. What's really interesting, even at Moto, because of course we're using this platform ourselves, is we added a photo module called Work From Home Chronicles, and it's a way for people to share what they're doing at home. And these are parts of people's lives you never would have seen before. So as an example here, one of our employees posted their companion app, so their dogs that are with them, and so if you're barking, this is why. And so we know a lot of people in the office and at Moto have pets, but now you start to see this new element to somebody's life. And when we come back to the office, I know something about that person that I didn't know before the pandemic, which is a really interesting way to think about it. Same thing here. This is a picture from Anna on the marketing team, a picture from her balcony. I knew roughly where she lived in Boston, but I didn't know she had a view like that. So that's, again, something to talk about and something that I didn't know about her even a month ago. So little things like that make a big difference, and I have a new aspect of that person's life and a new thing to talk about, a new part in terms of our friendship. So these little things make a big difference over time. It's also critically important that you crowdsource your community content and engagement. This is a really exciting feature because this allows you to not just have an app that is driven from the top down, either from the HR team or the strategic communications team, and they can still own the app, but you can delegate out and parse out parts of the app to be built up by sub-communities within your organization. On the higher ed side, it's really interesting to think about clubs who have their own presence in the app. Now, I can tell you some of my best friendships and experiences throughout my time as a college student were those in clubs and organizations. Not to say I didn't have a good time with the coursework, but college is bigger than coursework. And your professional life is bigger than just what's in your email inbox. So we should reflect that and celebrate that and make that part of the employee or the student experience. So imagine an affinity group or a club that has a presence in the app and how they're able to leverage that to stay connected and even grow their community, even though they're not on campus or not at the office. And so an example here is actually at Moto, we have different locations in the app for all of our locations. And so Newburyport, which is north of Boston, has their own location, as does Cincinnati, as does San Francisco, as does, of course, Cambridge. What's interesting about this is that the Newburyport location, as Cincinnati and the other locations, are run by people there, because nobody knows better than the people in that location. And so you can extend that to your own clubs, groups, sub-communities in your organization to say, all right, we're going to create a section just for the fencing club. Now, fencing is, of course, one of the things that most people are not doing right now because of COVID-19, but you can build up that community while you're at home. And when you come back to campus, either in the spring or summer or fall, you've been continuing to build and grow that community even while you're not there. And of course, like I've said before, everything you're doing now will benefit the entire organization when you come back to the office and come back to campus. And so in the case like a fencing club, you built up that community, people know about it, and then you come into the fall for the fall club recruitment, and everybody knows about it because you continue to build this experience. And events are also important. Even though you're remote, you can still go big digitally. And I encourage you to do that. For some, commencement is probably the seminal example right now. EDUCAUSE did a survey last week around commencement plans, and their results were that 40% of schools are either holding a virtual or online commencement or haven't decided what they're going to do yet, with the rest of the schools either canceling or postponing their commencement. And there's an odd 1% of schools which said they're going to do their normal commencement. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but 40% are either holding virtual or online commencements or haven't decided yet. So absent the physical commencement, or absent thousands of students coming to campus and sitting in the stadium for commencement, how can you make this not just an experience, but the best experience possible using something like a campus or workplace app? So there's all types of ideas for how people can, for example, share photos like we just looked at, or people can share their experiences, and you can, of course, live stream events like this, and we do this all the time. I'll show you an example here. This is NYU. So this is actually from a couple of years ago, but NYU sort of sets the stage for what's possible. You get a push notification, hey, if you can't attend commencement, don't worry, we have it in the app. You open up the notification, you read more about it, you tap on the link, and now you're in the 185th commencement for NYU, and the app has turned into this commencement celebration. And this is exactly what every Moto app can do, is allow you to not just say, all right, here's a link to the commencement website, but actually celebrate and create a commencement or an event experience as part of your app. And if I tap on watch the live stream, I'm watching this live stream. Now, the motivation this year is a little bit different for NYU. In the past, it was, hey, if you can't make it, you can watch it. Now it is, hey, you're not allowed to leave the house, you can watch it. And whatever form NYU or any school takes for that commencement, you can celebrate that and make an experience in the app. Think about something like uploading pictures of your commencement and showing pictures of you dressed up in your gown and sharing that in the app for other people to see. This now creates something that is bigger than just that weekend. You can actually come back and share those and look at those memories, which may be even better than, now I'm not going to say, as somebody who's been through commencement, it's not going to be the same experience as walking across the stage. But given the circumstances, we want to make this as great as possible for the people who are affected by this. And having a tool like this is a far better experience than just going to a website, seeing your name on the list, and getting your diploma in the mail. We want to celebrate these people, and if this doesn't drive engagement and get your people excited about what's next, I don't know what does. Push notifications, we talk about every time we do a webinar. Every communication, we talk about push notifications because they're not a nice feature. They're a must-have. They're a baseline tool. Moto app users passed 4 million devices, and this is going at an extremely rapid clip. We've been surprised the number of devices we're seeing registered, and our customers are sending 4 times the number of messages that they did 1 year prior. Push notifications are the baseline. They are tent stakes for what people are trying to do here. And you see examples here from schools like Ontario Tech, moving over to online learning. The push notification is how things are getting done. One of the things to keep in mind here is If you think about all the emails you've gotten about COVID-19, you've probably gotten them from every business you've talked to in the last 20 years. I never knew Taco Bell was so engaged in COVID-19, but I do now. And what happens is if you just stick to an email and that's all you do, they're not going to see that among the pile of emails from every company you've done business with in the last 20 years talking about COVID-19. Push notifications rise above that, and like I said earlier, it's one of the only devices they have in their hand all the time. University of Findlay, Euler Mobile, talking about their seasonal updates. They're doing these updates on a fairly regular basis, which is really interesting because a situation like COVID-19, the rules are changing a little bit. They're changing every day. The policies, scheduling, are we going to have commencement or not going to have commencement? That changes all the time. And so a tool like this allows people to get information out right away, exactly to the right audience, and not have to worry about, did somebody read this email among the huge pile? Yes, they saw this message and they're ready to go. Santa Monica College, SMC Go, talking about even linking to a web page. Even something like this is better than just an email, because somebody may say, hey, here's an email, I'll go to this web page and look. If they don't see it, at least this points them to, this is something you need to look at. A lot of these schools don't send a lot of push notifications out. So when they do, users know, and it's critically important they read this because it was big enough for this. And then another example here from University of Cincinnati, talking about spring 2020 remote learning. They're just ending their spring break. So now it's time to come back as Bearcats, and here's more information around online instruction. So they have all types of stuff in their app ready to go, here to support the users. But all these users are being engaged. Counting up these 4 schools, there are hundreds of thousands of students among these 4 schools just that are being engaged and keeping up to date with what's going on, allowing them to remain engaged, be successful, and stay on track towards their goals. So like I said, maintaining communications, critically important. We want to reach them where they are across all modalities. Now, I talked about email earlier, and I do think that email, and we do think that email is an important part. It is not the only thing you should be doing, for sure. Push is so easy to do, and it's instant. Everybody should be doing it. Email can be a part of this as well, and of course, our own Moto Communicate product handles that very well, where you can do something like an in-app banner and a push notification and an email all in one fell swoop, and you really should be doing that. So in the case where somebody may not have the app installed, they still have the banner, they still have the email, you want to cover that blanket. But relying on just email, just because that's what may have worked in the past, is not really sufficient today. I also encourage you to go beyond messaging to the campus or workplace as a whole. Now, for some things, it is perfectly fine and even encouraged to overshare a little bit. Something like a broad communication around COVID-19, it makes sense to send it to everybody, and even somebody who may not be directly affected, they should know. However, there's also an opportunity to engage specific groups of users, specific users by themselves around things to keep them engaged and on progress towards goals. So imagine a type of message that is, hey, don't forget to sign up for this, versus sending a message to the 50 or 40 people who have holds. That type of message is really important because it's really to the individual person and affects them directly. As we've said before, if you have a lot of messages that go to somebody and it doesn't pertain to them, they're more likely to turn off the app, delete the app, or turn off notifications, and it can be really tough to get them back. So while those broad COVID-19 type communications are still good for the mass audience, it's important to think about how you can continue to engage with individual users on topics that are really focused on them. Opt-in channels are another great way to do this. We'll talk about that more in just a second. The idea here is that we want to make sure that every notification that you send to somebody is about them, either broadly or individually. And scheduled nudges as notifications, both broad and specific, help your users stay on track. So I hope you see that everything we're talking about here is not just engagement for engagement's sake, but it's about getting people on track, moving towards those goals, even though they're not at work, even though they're not on campus. It's important we continue that engagement so people stay on track, keep aiming towards their goals. It's also important here, as I say, to establish easy and multiple methods of contact from your users back to the organization. So how do we do that? How do you make it easy? Well, of course, we talk about push and how easy it is to send something out. How does the user get information about something or ask a question? And so for that, I'm going to show an example. It's really very simple from Humboldt State University up in Northern California. So this is their home screen right now. And you can see that they, of course, are featuring COVID-19 there on the top. And if I tap on COVID-19, I see, excuse me, a screen for We Are Humboldt. And I want to pause here because this app screen is a fantastic example of what we've been talking about. And of course, Humboldt did this on their own. But the idea, if you look at those top 3 topics, keep learning, keep teaching, keep working, they are embodying everything we've been talking about for this entire webinar, which is the idea that you want to keep learning, keep going towards graduation, getting those classes done, keep teaching as an instructor, and then keep working as an employee. This is exactly what we're trying to talk about in Humboldt, is showing us exactly how it should be done. And if I tap on a directory, I see this. Now, what's interesting about Humboldt, going back to our topic for this slide, easy and multiple methods of contact from your users back to the organization. What Humboldt had previous to COVID-19 was a directory module. You could search for anybody in the directory, you get their information, you can tap an email or call them. And at the bottom of that directory, they had some what they called quick calls or quick links for things like financial aid, registrar's office, housing and res life, grad students or grad studies. What they've realized during COVID-19 is that these are what's most important, not the searchable directory. So they've flipped it upside down. This is what you see when you go to the directory, and what they're going to add on the bottom is a link to the full searchable directory, because 90% or more of the people that are coming to this really want one of these. They don't want to search for an office, they just want to go tap financial aid, hit email, or hit a call and go. What I predict Humboldt might do after COVID-19 is over and everybody's back on campus, they'll leave it like this, because this will likely prove out that what people really wanted was very quick access to things like this. And of course, we have our analytics tool that can help prove that out, and we can show the popularity of a module like this versus the directory module. But I would wager that people will stay with this because this is really what students are looking for. And like I said, everything that you do here is not just for when people are being asked to stay at home. The things you do now for engagement, for making it easier for users to be engaged, will continue to pay dividends when everybody comes back to campus. One more example here. This comes from Cali College, which has given us some fantastic examples for how to do communications. This is an excellent example where they actually sent an email out, but they knew that people may not read it, or they may get buried in this list of emails. So they're saying, hey, tap you on the shoulder, go back and check your email. This is something you need to do. Go back and see this. So this is an excellent example, very easy to do, but it gets the word across. It keeps that engagement up and helps drive all your users in the right direction. Equally important that we not just communicate, but we want to inform and engage and empower our users. There's a lot of ways to do this. I'll show you some more examples of how customers are really making this happen. University of Central Florida has a dashboard of what's available. This is very, very cool because this shows for things that are on campus that people may continue to use, can I use it? And so you see here, all the study locations are closed. Makes sense. But the Amazon Hub Locker is open. And as a student at UCF who may be living close to campus, I may be using that during COVID-19 to get important supplies. So knowing that that is open is a huge advantage for me as a student. Another example here, food security, or food insecurity rather. There are a number of schools like Humboldt. This is Sacramento State, and there are other schools that are doing this as well, that broadcast about extra food after events. Now, what we may not think about in this COVID-19 situation is that there may be students who still have food insecurity issues, except now the dining halls may be closed. Now all these events that produce excess food are not happening. So this is something to consider as you're thinking through your strategy and your engagement strategy. Think about all the different people and the ways you're using your app and how they might be affected if that on-campus experience, if that at-work experience isn't there anymore. This is another way that you can choose to continue to engage with those users and make sure that they're taken care of. Opt-in channels are a way that Sac State and other schools actually take care of this. They have opt-in channels that people can opt into, and they get notified. And only the people who opt into that channel are notified when there is food. So how can you leverage an opt-in channel like this, given that there are no events producing food? How can you continue to serve those students who may not have anywhere else to go or anything else to eat? Another example here is Cypress College out in California again. And they actually sent this out yesterday. So they had a digital town hall where everybody could join, hear from the leadership at the university or at the college and get information, ask questions. Things like this will always be long email updates that nobody will read because remember that they're buried with all the Taco Bell emails. How do you have something like this, and how can you use something like this to drive engagement through the app? Using the app to keep people informed, excited, and in the know about what's going on. This is how you build that community and grow that community. Also important not to forget your on-site users. So when I say that, there are still people coming to the office. They may be your skeleton crew, your IT, as an example. You may have international students in higher ed who aren't able to go home. And so they are a population we need to continue to serve. And think about how you engage them and give them resources so they can be successful while they are stuck on campus can be very beneficial. And if you think about the experience you can provide them, they will be forever grateful to you down the road because you helped them get resources they needed when they needed it most. The last thing I'll mention here is to get people excited for what awaits them when return. Now I would approach this carefully because you can get people really excited and sort of sad at the same time that they're not there to see what's on campus. But let's say you have a renovation coming out. Let's say you have a new feature coming to your office. Tease that and get people excited. So they're not just thinking about being stuck at home for forever, but remind them this is temporary. And when they come back, there's exciting things to look forward to. It's also important to maintain users' personal and professional progress. This is, reaching towards goals, not just keeping people responding to email, but how do we actually keep moving that needle forward? So tracking progress through analytics tools, success metrics, much like you might be doing today, or might have been doing, and sharing those learnings with leadership is very helpful. That helps you to see what's going on and also analyze trends between what is happening now and what had happened maybe a couple months ago. That may provide you some important insight for how you need to modify that app-based engagement to keep people on track. It's important to set expectations and boundaries here and provide those really clear and concise directions. As people are in this new normal, they're not really sure what to do. Having those expectations, which by the way, may be a little different than your expectations when they are in the classroom or in the office, helping them set those expectations is really important so they know that they're on the right track and doing the right things they need to be doing. And then of course, avoid overwhelming them. People are still getting used to the fact that they're working at home, they've got their pets, they've got their family, they're helping their kids out. All that is still happening at the same time. So instead of just dumping everything on them, having that project or lesson work staggered out can be very helpful and help people adjust into this new normal. Ahead of that, business is more than your email inbox and your tasks, and your college life, your academic life is more than just classwork. So it's really interesting to think about personal progress and how you can engage your users beyond that business, beyond the academic life, with things like wellness, levity experiences. If you have, let's say, a morning yoga session at the office, could you do that through an online meeting? Could you have some type of fun experiences on Fridays? We actually do this here at Moto. We do we do a fun Friday at the end of the month where we just have pizza and we'll play video games. We actually did sort of a Zoom version of that on Friday. It was really fun. We played trivia or sort of memory contests online. It was fun. And we got to see a different side of people, and we had that connection that we wouldn't have had otherwise. Deepening relationships with those one-on-one engagements with advisors and mentors can be very helpful, especially if you haven't done that before. Think about how you can link up people to talk, not just in a huge group, but one-on-one. Talk about the challenges you're facing, talk about the goals you're looking towards, and setting plans, even though you're not in the office. This can also pay huge dividends once people come back to the office. And then building confidence and trust with virtual leadership engagement. This is important to have your leadership be there on video, talking about what's going on, talking about the reality of the situation, and keeping people on task and focused towards the next steps. Having the leadership up there is a big deal and helps, as opposed to just having them sending these emails with no real interaction or leadership that's out in front. So to close up, I want to talk about a couple resources that Modo has for you today. The first one is our Coronavirus Response Center. It's at motolabs.com/COVID-19. It's available for everybody today. And we've got all types of things on there, such as a Modo Crisis Response Starter Kit for COVID-19. It's available for every single Modo customer. You can install it on your app today, and it provides you professionally designed templates for you to set up a COVID-19 resource center in your application right away. This is what your users are looking for. They're going to your app every day. They want to find out what's going on. And beyond just linking to a website, you can have a really fantastic experience that informs and engages those users right within the app. So that's available, no additional charge for that. It's available today for all Modo customers. We also have things around best practices for communications from the University of Findlay, information on how schools like University of Utah are using and adapting and modifying the starter kit, which is great, to their own needs. All that is available. We're going to continue to add content on here. All the information about the webinar series, like the one you're listening to right now, is going to be on there as well. And so every single person is encouraged to go to motolabs.com/COVID-19, where we'll continue to update content there. Also, for all Modo customers, iModo exists today for you to use, either in the iOS or Android App Store. You can also go to i.motolabs.com and sign in with your App Center credentials. And what you'll see when you sign in, either as a higher ed or enterprise customer, all the COVID-19 resources are right up front. You have a tab to the resources, the webinar, which is the last one. We'll update that as soon as this recording is available. Tap in the resources and you'll see everything from upcoming events, information about the starter kit. You can tap on peer examples and see what other schools, see what other schools have been doing in terms of push notifications, FAQs, starter kits. Learn from your peers and take, just borrow what they've done and use it for yourself. We really encourage that. And we have a huge cache of customers who are doing really fantastic things to keep people informed about COVID-19. Even things like our user group, we're actually moving that into bi-weekly calls. The next one's going to be tomorrow at 3 o'clock Eastern. And this is just a roundtable for all of our customers to get together and talk about the challenges they're facing, get help, get ideas, share business cards, and just keep connected with each other. So of course, everything regarding that is at iModo for you today. The last thing I'll say, and I talked about this earlier, your app is the new campus and the new workplace. This is where your users are going to go. This is where they're expecting and demanding to be engaged. And it's your opportunity here to meet them. As part of this, Modo is absolutely here to help you with this. Whatever you are looking to do, whether or not you're a customer, please ask. If you want to implement something like the starter kit or something bigger, if you have a challenge, a question, a frustration you're looking to get answered with what you're dealing with on campus or at work, ask us. Just let us know and we will absolutely work with you one-on-one to come up with something that helps you out. We are absolutely here to help you engage your community, to build that best experience, and we want you to come back to campus and come back to the workplace a stronger group than you were before. And so we're here to help you with that. So please reach out to us and let us know how we can help. And with that, I want to thank everyone for your time today. I appreciate it very much. And we do have a couple minutes at the end for some questions.
Perfect, great. Thank you so much, Matt. this is the part of the webinar where I would give you a high five, but unfortunately we're both working separately and I don't have
We'll
that.
save it for later.
Yeah, for sure. So just a reminder, if you have any questions on anything that Matt touched upon during today's webinar, please submit it to the admin console on the screen. Any questions that we don't end up getting to you over the line, we will reach out to you directly to respond to. So I see a couple coming in now. I think looking at the time, we just have time for just a couple of questions. So I'm gonna pick a good couple ones. Okay, yeah, this one's good. So Matt, how are businesses or corporate customers using their app with their employees for this?
That's good. Yeah, for the situation. Yeah, so that's a good question. We do see a number of our customers who have started to, Vail Resorts is a good example of a customer that has been really proactive in using things like push notifications and in-app content to help inform their users. You know, they have an extremely large user base that is distributed across multiple continents even. And what they've been doing is using the app first and foremost to do push notifications and then send out information around how people can stay safe, especially for an environment where you have a lot of different visitors. We're seeing a lot of patterns between what is happening in higher ed and happening in enterprise. And unlike wanting to set up online classes, they're online meetings. Instead of setting up class progression, it is just task progression. So they're facing a lot of the same issues and responding to them in a lot of the same way. They want to use the app as a way to engage that community, keep everybody on task, and progressing towards those goals. So when they come back after this is all over, they'll be bigger and stronger than before.
Perfect. And I guess this will be our last question just for today, but what about older employees that are not mobile native and may not want to use an app?
That's a great question. So what we've seen is that although a large percentage of our user base is very familiar with mobile and downloads apps for everything and is very used to this, we do see some users who maybe just don't have a ton of experience with native apps, prefer a desktop, and that's okay. What I've shown you, all the screenshots I've shown you today are based on the iOS and Android apps. However, we do, of course, extend the Moto platform into the desktop. And so it's very easy to build up content that would appear both in the app and the desktop at once. You author it once. Again, there's no code required. You deploy your content, and no matter if a user is using an iPhone or Android device, iPad, Android tablet, or desktop, they can see the same content and interact in the same way. So we support, of course, the desktop as well. So for those users, we can certainly accommodate them in the very same way.
Perfect. Well, yeah, I want to thank everyone again for their time, and appreciate you joining us today with everything that's going on. Just as a reminder, we'll be sending out a recorded version of this webinar as soon as I'm finished uploading the recording. So you'll see that shortly in your inbox. So if you have any questions or comments, please email communications@motolabs.com, and we can connect you with Matt or any of our experts on the team to go over anything from today's webinar. Thank you everyone today, and we'll hope to see you soon and hope you're staying safe.
Great, thanks everybody.